So I'm really, really pleased that we've got Stephanie Keenan from With You. So With You are the charity formerly known as Add Action. So I'm sure Stephanie will talk a wee bit about the kind of rebrand and the rethink and the kind of fresh approach that they've got. I'm really excited about this one because I've been using Where Add Action them as a really, I guess, simple, powerful case study of how live chat can be deployed and actually how it can be used for more than just signposting, and actually for a range of quite intensive services and interventions. And for me, they're the organisation that does it incredibly well. So Stephanie's going to be talking a wee bit about that today and about some of their online groups. And these are kind of two core areas that keep coming up time and time again when we're on calls. And I think where this call is really useful is we're not just talking about the kind of theoretical side of wouldn't it be nice if we have live chat. It's that next step of what are the lessons learned? What does the deployment of that look like? How do we design services? How do we keep privacy and safeguarding in mind? So any questions at all that you've got, ping them in the chat and we can pick them up as we go. And I know Stephanie's got a presentation as well. And we'll talk a wee bit about it as well. There's the service recipe for this service. So if you've not seen these before, these are essentially, I guess, built on the basis of a case study, but giving you the practical application of that case study, and that's often what's lacking in a lot of case studies. So we'll put the link in the chat, but if you'll get them on the Catalyst website, and there's a whole range of recipes in there now, but there's specifically one on online group services that With You run. So I'm going to hand you over to Stephanie just now.
Good morning, everyone. It's still morning so far, so I'm doing well. Hi, I will just start sharing my screen. Hopefully this will work. Oh. Got to love it when technical stuff works well, don't you?
I made you co-host as well, Stephanie, in case that helps. So fingers crossed we've got them. And just to say, for those of you while we're waiting, if you need them for accessibility reasons or anything else, then if you click on the chat, you'll notice that Siobhan's put in Steph's slides. So there's a Google Drive link there, so you can open them up on your own device if you want as well.
Yeah, it's great to see where everyone's from. So most people today from Scotland. We've got someone from Northern Ireland, in housing in Northern Ireland, lots of different organisations right across the whole country of Scotland.
It's pretty amazing.
Hey, some people at home, some people in the office. Excellent, well done, Stephanie.
No pressure there.
Oh, North London come in as well.
Oh,
welcome.
Hello.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so my name is Stephanie Keenan. I work for the charity We Are With You. My job is, I was talking about it earlier on, I'm a bit of half and half. My background is always, has been operational. So I am a contracts manager for the digital operations within the charity. And I've just recently started working with our digital team and a product owner shape, looking at a different part of the offer that we do and the support that we provide. So a little bit about We Are With You, just to start. Our charity was founded in 1967. It was started by a woman who had lost her son after a heroin overdose, and she had wrote an article in The Guardian looking to pull people together who were interested in supporting individuals who were struggling with addiction. She knew herself that it was the power of people to put pressure on changes in legislation and how we actually support individuals. And that was where the Association for the Prevention of Addiction, APA, was founded. From there, we have grown, and we had a name change in 1998 to Add Action, which coincided with our integration within Scotland as well. So just now we've got 80 services that run through England up to Scotland. The majority of the income that we have is from local authority contracts. So we have got face-to-face support. I know that sounds crazy these days, but we have face-to-face support that provides anything from psychosocial interventions to prescription services, and also mental health services as well in some parts of England. We're a national charity. We employ about 1,400 staff as well throughout. And to date, we have currently around 160,000 service users. Recently, we had a brand change, and that was to coincide actually with when Molly Craven started APA. What we noticed was when people heard ad action, they felt it could be stigmatizing, and whether it was good for the period of time that we had the name from 1998, but things move on and things change, and that was something that was really apparent with our name, that it was putting people off because they might not consider themselves to have an addiction, or they might not have identified with that name, and we wanted to make ourselves as open as possible to people. And from there, we ran a campaign looking at what would be the most cohesive name, if you like, or what would attract the most people. And We Are With You is what had came out of that. But before the name change in 2017, we had a terrible website. I don't know if anybody else can identify with that, but we had a ghastly website that was trying to meet the needs of every single person who could possibly have ever used our site, from commissioners to people who were looking for help themselves to other organisations, and everything had been written in a way for people who were part of the field. So there was nothing really that if you were not known within or you didn't know much within trying to access support, and an awful lot of it didn't make very much sense. And in 2017, we looked at ways in which we could support people on the website, and web chat was born from there. It was started by myself and Andrew Horn, who is he is the executive director for We Are With You, but he also comes from an operational background. And in our Glasgow office, we sat down at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning and turned our web chat on. We used an out-the-box live chat function, and that was so that we could test it. I think one of the big things that we wanted to do was start small. We were interested to find out what we were going to get through, if it was at all something of interest to people. So we started with this off-the-box solution. And when we turned it on that very first day, we had 50 conversations for people, which was terrifying for for between two people. There's not very often that you speak to 25 different people in one day, all people who came in from various walks of life. There was people who were looking for support themselves. There was professionals. There was concerned others. There was people who were interested in jobs. So what that really highlighted to us was that our website wasn't really serving anybody. It wasn't really a case of being able to reach the people that we needed to reach with the information that we needed to reach. The way that our system works is that we'll keep a record of conversations over 2 years. So for the past 2 years, we've had 34,000 conversations with individuals. We started it ran from 10 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and that was based off of when our website was its busiest. So when using a bit of Google Analytics to check when we had the most visitors on the website was how we decided what hours were best to run for people. We always had this assumption that people would need help at 2 o'clock in the morning, but our testing of our web chat hours never really showed that was something that would have been viable to maintain, and there wasn't the traffic of people who were interested in support at that time in the morning. And whether or not that was just because they weren't finding our website is another thing that's always an interesting test to find out. But it was such a unique opportunity to learn from people who had never accessed treatment before. Me and Andrew have always approached web chat as less of a transaction trying to get people into service and more as a conversation. Recovery worker in your pocket is pretty much how I describe it. everybody who mans the web chat has got at least 2 years experience of delivering face-to-face interventions with people. So they've got that ability to communicate. My giant assumption that everybody that works on web chat is able to talk to people, and it's yet to be proven wrong, which is always a bonus. But yeah, from the conversations is where the birth of the new website really started, because what we were able to see was what people were actually asking, what questions people were interested in finding out for, and what language that they were actually using. So if we were trying to mirror the language that the individuals used within our content, then it gave us an opportunity to really hone in what we were doing. As I said, our website wasn't great to start with, so we were able to strip back. And with the rebrand, we were able to launch a brand new website. We had got funding from the National Lottery that enabled us to employ a digital team. So we have a web developer, we have content designers, we have design designers, and we have a whole host of people. I say a whole host, there's 5 of us, who are able to work on what exactly it is that we were needed on the website. So these conversations, the things that really came to the forefront, where people didn't know what treatment was, or what, treatment as a word, I think can be really confusing for people, and they weren't sure how to access help, if help would cost, and where they would go, and what options were available to them. So we were really able to start that conversation from the very basic point of being completely anonymous. That was to try and stop barriers in people being able to access support. One of the things that I'm a big advocate for is that we use an awful lot of data about individuals to try and get more information and get more insight from people. And a lot of web chats that I had used previously, you had to answer an awful lot of questions before you were even allowed in to speak to anybody. So the only thing that we ask is that people understand our terms and conditions, which are freely available to people. And that meant that someone could start a conversation and without that fear of we would know too much about them. At the end of the conversation, we have a post-chat survey, and that post-chat survey is where we would gather information, and that's completely optional. So people only need to fill that in if they want to, but it gives us a really good insight into the people that are using it. Roughly, there's about 25% of people who will have a conversation fill in the post-chat survey, which is a good enough representative sample for us to be able to make decisions based on that as well. So from the first days of being able to deliver that 10 o'clock till 4 o'clock, when we moved over onto our new platform, I was really keen to expand the hours in which we delivered the support. So we started at 9 o'clock in the morning and we finished at 9 o'clock at night. The service is run primarily with internal staff. So our staff are on a second contract with the digital services, which means that they are employed normally during the day to have their normal sort of working day, whatever job it is that they do. And in the evenings and the weekends, they would work on web chat. They would pick and choose what shifts that they would do within the web chat team. Just now we have got a team of 30 people who are on that sort of second contract with us, and we have 4 full-time members of staff that work on web chat. So during the day, at any one time, there's 3 people that work on the web chat service, and we roughly go through about 75 conversations a day. Bear in mind that it's a UK-wide, so it is in a big area that we cover to be able to provide that kind of support. What we also do is that it doesn't matter what area that you're in, we will still provide the support for the individual. So if that individual is in an area that is commissioned by a different service, and if they're interested in accessing support from that different service, then we will try and link them in as much as possible. And one of the things that really comes through is making that first conversation with somebody allaying their fears about what it is to access support, and then taking the next step, we're able to provide a bit of a nudge for them as well. So, you know, we would say to them, if you want to hang on, well, you know, you make that phone call, we'll be here and we can chat through. And that let us do two things. If it was internal, if it was within our organisation and they didn't necessarily get a response, then we could follow that up. You know, we had different methods of communicating with specific teams. If it was external, then we could almost act as advocates for them, or we could phone the service and ask the service to phone them back. And that made it as soft a landing as humanly possible for someone to get the right help. And one of the things that kind of came through really quickly was that there was people who would access web chat who had absolutely no interest in accessing face-to-face support. They had no desire to, or they couldn't do it through their jobs. People who were teachers, people who worked in the armed forces, they would put their job at risk, or they felt that they would put their job at risk by accessing that kind of support. And that's where web chat kind of came into its own. We were able to provide that online journey for somebody so that they could access the support via web chat. They could arrange times in which they could come in and speak to a specific worker. And that gave them that part of a journey where they could talk about their fears, they could talk about their anxieties, and work through specific tools to be able to achieve whatever it was that their goal was. So we also don't have any sort of direct things where you must be abstinent, or you must be this, or you must be that. We work with the individual with what their goals are. If they just want to cut down from 7 bottles of wine to 6 bottles of wine, then we'll work with them to achieve that goal as well, while understanding what our limitations are as well. We're very aware that there's need for medical intervention with some individuals, and we can support them into how to access that within their area, because as I'm sure that everybody's aware, if they work in any field that's commissioned, it can be very different depending on what area that you are. And people who work on web chat tend to be some of the saddest people in the world when it comes to the weather forecast coming up, and you're able to tell what the local service is when they sort of mention an area within a map of the UK. So you get a really good knowledge of what's available in an area and how people are best able to access support. Now, one of the big things that happened as part of web chat was we were signposting people away from our website to use tools, to use other services where they could get peer support, or where they could access a drinks checker to check on how much units that they were drinking, or a distraction tool. And that gave us a good opportunity to ensure that that person was supported in the area that they needed supported, but we weren't able to guarantee the quality of what that person was going on to. So one of the big things that we'll always sort of recommend to people, smart recovery, if people aren't interested in any of the kind of fellowships, we will signpost to like a smart recovery service, or something for online support, and they do some really fantastic work there as well. But to be able to offer someone a more complete journey where we could guarantee what people would get at that next step, we began to explore the idea of a national group. We started off pretty small in terms of our groups in general. We run mutual aid partnership groups, and these are in the similar vein in which Smart Recovery is. It uses tools and techniques to help people get the opportunity to work through a specific tool during the peer support session. So it's individuals who are struggling with either drugs or alcohol. There's no sort of specific groups for specific categories within. And they come together and they work together over a tool or a specific technique relating to recovery or whatever their specific goal is. And these are fantastic groups that are held throughout the UK, and people can access that once they're part of the service as well. what we noticed was that kind of face-to-face services, the relationships, are the things that were the most important to people. So that building that peer network within the group, they were able to be really passionate about it. And that was something that was quite interesting, because when we were coming from it and an aspect of thinking about taking it online, there were some people who were resistant to that idea of it would work in an online. For one, the biscuits weren't as good if you had to provide them yourself. And making your own tea and coffee doesn't seem anywhere near as fun. But we were really interested to use this model to see whether or not an online version of it would be able to work, and if it would be something that people would be interested in attending. So we wanted to work in as an iterative way as possible. So that just basically meant that we started as small as possible, using kind of like prototypes to learn with real people. And we would only make things available when we had enough feedback to say that we were getting it right. And even after we had published it, or even after it was available, we could still make changes based on what we were learning if there was something coming through. And that's how we base our whole sort of digital approach, including things that are on the website, is that if we get feedback from individuals about things being good or things being not so good, then we can change it based on what we get, to be able to adapt and make sure that we're hitting the right audience with the right information. The thing that web chat really brought through was the language that people use. People genuinely don't know what a MAP stands for. A mutual aid partnership is also a wee bit confusing for people. So we would change the language somewhat, so that we would talk about problem solving groups, to make sure, because people understand what that means, and that enables them to identify and to build a connection with it. And we would always design it as much as possible for people with low literacy and a mobile first approach, so that most people have a mobile phone, and that was where our design focus was, so that people who had a mobile phone would be able to access that. And I'm totally aware that it's not right for everybody. There is people that we identified that this wouldn't be the right path for them. One of our big targets that we set out was to try and reach 10 times more people. And the people that were already engaging with face-to-face services and supporting with face-to-face services, we do that well. We're able to engage with the people, but there's another subset of individuals who aren't really interested in accessing that face-to-face support. And the digital way was a way in which we could try and reach the people as well. So the accessibility for people was something that we had at the forefront of our mind. And yeah, one of if you can see the graph there, we started delivering online groups pretty much the very first day of lockdown. And that was locally within services. So within a physical location, we transitioned from a Microsoft world within the organisation into a Google world. And that Google world allowed a lot, for us at that time, allowed a lot better collaboration, and also allowed us access to being able to use the functions of that without having to buy in any third-party technologies, like Zoom for some people, or Microsoft Teams for others. So we used Google Meet. And I think you can see the date that lockdown started, how quickly everybody changed to actually speaking to people over Google Meet, as opposed to over the phone or in that kind of face-to-face. The service has done fantastic about being able to leap into action. Within obviously my physical base is within Glasgow, and I know that the services within Glasgow, they ran groups twice a day, every single day, in partnership both with another agency. So the Mungo Foundation was in the south side of Glasgow, and we covered the east and the west side of Glasgow. So they all banded together and were able to provide 2 groups a day for individuals who were looking to access support. And that was one physical location. And then that started in every single area that we had services. And some of the fantastic feedback that we had was that there was individuals who had no interest in accessing groups because that fear of stepping through the door was too much for them, that they weren't able to they were only able to deal with the one-to-one support that they were getting at the time. So in Bournemouth, one of the services that we have in Bournemouth, one of the feedback from a group member was that he'd attended his first group because he could do it sitting in his living room, and that he didn't have to turn on his his voice, or he didn't have to turn on his video, and that gave him a really good opportunity to be able to partake in peer support in a way in which that he'd never thought was possible before. Within the organisation, the confidence with the facilitators as well, and people who weren't necessarily feeling very tech savvy to begin with, they got the opportunity to practice on a daily basis of delivering doing map skills with groups of people. And the digital team, again, they were fantastic at leaping into action as well, and created a resource guide of how to be able to run a map group. So first and foremost, they created this this map for a group, and that was to break it down for people's ideas of what it was like to first find out about it, all the way through when people were wanting to sort of finish up the group. So they had examples, they had the tools that I was speaking about, they created them on a PowerPoint presentation, again, to make it as easy as possible for people to present to individuals so that they could link in with that. And the recovery workers really took it and ran with it. So the local level groups were going great, and they weren't just like sort of mutual aid groups. There are problem solving groups. There was Zumba classes at one point and art classes at one point. So they were really trying to meet the needs of people who wanted other things apart from recovery journeys as well. And from there, we started to build on that. We started with joining up two services together, so two different locations. One of them was in Wigan and the other one was in Cornwall, and having that joint up approach allowed the facilitators to test out whether or not mixing two groups of people would be something that they were able to manage on a smaller scale before we leapt into everybody being able to access it. And that proved really useful, and it also gave us an opportunity to, I'm always interested in whether or not people who have specific issues would feel more comfortable in a group with the specific issues. So if you've got, for instance, a cocaine issue and you're in one area of the country, being in a group with another person with a cocaine issue that's not really local to you gives an opportunity to work on recovery without some of the barriers or without some of the risks that are involved around that as well. So this gave us a really good opportunity to test that out, and all the feedback that we got was about the different styles and how much people enjoyed the different styles of the facilitators, and getting a refreshed passion for being able to attend the groups as well. So the national groups, they've been running now for about 8 weeks. So we've ran them for about 2 months. And how it works is that if someone's accessing our web chat service and they're talking through some of the issues that they're experiencing and they have got that support there, then we'll give them the opportunity to sign up for the group. And the reason that we done it this way was so that we could keep it small to start with. If we created a sign up page and we weren't able to meet the demand, then that wasn't a very good user experience. That wasn't a very good journey for somebody. If they wanted to sign up for a group and then it was too full and people didn't show up, that would be not a great time for somebody to be able to access support. So by starting it small on the web chat service, it gave us the opportunity to test that if there would be even anybody that would attend. So someone gets asked if they would be interested in joining up to the group. We then take their email address and we email them the how to join the group, and that includes a guide of what to do, how to, we use Google Meet. If you're using that on a mobile phone, you have to download an app, so that gives us the opportunity to download that app, and also to deal with any issues that come up with it. So we'll have a practice with them so that they can try and log in and try and join it to make sure that there's no issues with that. And then once they sign up to the group, it runs on a Tuesday between 6 p.m. and 7:30. So it runs for an hour and a half. We are available until 8 o'clock as well. And that enabled us to have the web chat team there to support any individual who'd attended the group that we might need additional support, because we run until 9 o'clock at night. There was a good overhang within that. Within our governance structure, we always have a manager that's on call, and the manager that's on call deals with any safeguarding concerns or anything that kind of pops up within the team. And they're on call from 9 in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. And again, that was to enable the right support for the right people at that time. So people who had attended the group, what I was interested in was, one, how they had found the experience of it, but also if there was people who didn't attend the group, why not? You know, I think that we really learn a lot more for people who don't attend something rather than necessarily people that do. So having the opportunity, because we had contact details from them, was to follow up with them and to find out what it was that was some of the barriers for people accessing that group. We, at the very beginning, we started with an idea of, to measure the impact, is that we'd look at a rating scale. So when someone enters the group, how do they feel? And then when someone leaves the group, how do they feel? If they can give us a word to describe. One of my favourite words to describe at the end of the group was hungry. But yeah, but individuals will, you know, they'll be brutally honest when they're, you know, when they're talking as well. But the increase in people who started the group compared to when they finished the group was it was on a rating scale from 0 to 10, and on average they went up 1.7 points from the start of the group to the end of the group. We also follow that up with just a survey monkey to check in with them about how they're feeling, or if they're needing any, you know, additional support, and we're able to link them in with the right support if they were able to do that. And the people that don't access the group, we've found that Google Meet isn't necessarily right for everybody. We know that people don't really like having to download an additional app onto their phone, or on, you know, in logging in. They have to know about what account they would use to log in as well. So we've noticed that there's some learnings from it, and our steps towards what we're looking to do is that if we're getting, I think yesterday the group ran yesterday, and there was 9 people that attended, and on average we're getting between 7 and 11 people attend the group on a Tuesday, and that's still manageable numbers, and it's still something that we're able to grow from as well. We're still able to sort of put on a different day if the day is not suitable for people. So yeah, interest just now is about gathering that information from people who didn't attend the group. Yeah, so we identified that this is a pilot. You know, this is a test for us to see about what works and what doesn't work. We know that there is really good, fantastic supports out there and fantastic groups out there. And the way that we want to run our group is that we want to make sure that the people who are attending it are getting the right form of support. So all the facilitators within the group are specifically trained on group work. We have a really small core audience of facilitators as well. So as much as the web chat team's got 30 people on it, the facilitators with the map is currently sitting at 3. So there's 3 map facilitators, which means that if people attend and they're not getting a lot of different faces, they would only get a small number. And we have 1 volunteer who's a little bit like our plant. He is got lots of experience within map groups, and everybody knows that he's a volunteer when he attends. He introduces himself as such, but he's also able to sort of guide people in terms of the conversation and what way in which people were looking to kind of share information. So that's been really a key point, as well as making sure that when starting a group that there's people who are attending that know what to expect of the group, and that lets help build confidence of the other people that are attending. This is just a little bit of feedback that we've had from one of the members that had attended the group, and it's been really nice to sort of see sometimes on web chat someone's recovery or someone's journey with yourself on web chat ends and you're not able to see what happens next. You know, you're able to triage what's going on for them, you know, provide the support that they need, and then they might go and access a service, or they might go and, you know, put into practice the things that you've spoke about on that day, but we never really have what comes next for people. The groups are able to give that opportunity to, you know, have a sort of forward journey for somebody and to be able to see how they found that experience of it. You know, identifying triggers in a safety plan has been one of the key parts and one of the nicest experiences people have had, because people who access web chat or people who access the group haven't got any experience of services normally in the past. So they've got this real naivety about what is expected of them, or what it actually means to have a habit with a substance. So this enables it to be really broken down and get the right information out. And yeah, I suppose that's me come to my end, if there's any questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Steph. I'm going to give Stephanie a clap just now because that was so useful. It was so useful. There's been loads of questions coming in from chat. Siobhan, any that kind of stand out for you? Will we take them in order, or any kind of big ones you want to kind of pick up first of all?
Yeah, no, that was just so interesting, Stephanie, and a lot of it reflects what I've heard from some women's aid charities who are also trying to run online groups and web chat, especially around that people don't feel comfortable going to face-to-face, and these online sessions have opened up like a whole new set of clients that they didn't even know were there, or they had in their waiting list for years who didn't feel they could come. So yeah, loads of new opportunities for online work. So there's some really specific questions around the live chat. So what software are you using? Do you have an idea of the costs? Is that integrated into your CRM? And then on the like post chat, like what survey questions are you asking in your feedback?
Yeah, so we use a software called Live Chat Inc. Is the type of software that we use. I'm just having a wee look to see if I can get you up-to-date information about it. Ours isn't integrated to our CRM just now. We use a separate system, and depending on what's commissioned locally within our area, I think that's one of the sort of barriers for us, is that we are dictated somewhat by what a commissioner wants in a specific area for the case management tool. So in some areas we'll use Nebula from Orion. That's some of it. In other areas we'll use a different case management system. So we've not managed to have it almost like a referral through. We're working on a different experience for people, like for that individual thing, so that it can get linked within the system. And that's a work in progress just now. But in terms of the cost, live chat we picked because it had a European server for one. We wanted to stay within the GDPR of being able to provide something that was secure within the European Union. So it was within the European Union, and the cost to start up was, it charged per seat, and it was $16 per seat, so per month. So we were able to have 2 seats at that cost. So for £32 or $32 a month, we were able to kind of start it out and to see whether or not. In terms of post-chat survey, I'm really interested in how we gather better information about people's experience on web chat. I think that one of the things that has been lacking in the past is being able to say what kind of impact web chats had on people. So our post-chat survey has recently just changed, and I worked with a user researcher to be able to identify good questions to ask as part of that. So some of the questions that we'll ask is, how easy or difficult was it to use it? Whether or not you know what to do next off of the back of it. Do you feel that you're able to take a next step? Have you ever sought help before? And looking at it just now, so over the past 7 days, 60% of people who have used our web chat service have never accessed help before. So that's a high proportion of people that have never taken a step through a door or made a phone call before. we're looking at how we better support people in minority communities as well. So we asked some demographic information to see whether or not web chat is an accessible function for people who are maybe in a minority community that don't want to access that face-to-face support. So just now we've got 10% of people who identify as part of the LGBTQ plus community accessing it. And whether or not people, if COVID had played an important part of, that was one of the other questions, it's just been a recent addition to it. So during the peak of the pandemic, 70% of people who came onto web chat, COVID had played an important part of it. And now we're down to 70% the other way. 70% of people say that they're not interested. It's not been because of COVID. So we've noticed a real peak and trough of it. And then just off the back of that, just some demographics about how old you are, what your ethnicity is, and if you've ever served in the armed forces. Again, you're just looking at how we can better target and better support people.
Right, that's useful, Stephanie. Okay. Any other questions, Siobhan? Siobhan, you're on mute, by the way, just for your chat.
Yeah, so Louise, that was really useful, Stephanie, thank you. Louise was asking what percentage uptake you have in that survey. I think you did touch on that in your talk. But could you also talk about then, because that was quite a high percentage, like how do you introduce that survey to encourage people to actually take it?
So it just pops up automatically at the end of the conversation. It's not something that the worker has to do anything to start. So once that person ends that conversation, it pops up and people can fill it in. And they can fill in as much or as little of it as they want, and try to give them as many options as possible. If they don't want to fill it in, then that's fine. We had an assumption about web chat being accessed by more females than males. We don't ever ask someone's name or anything, so you don't really know as part of your conversation. I've had many a conversation where I think I'm talking to a Siobhan and I'm ended up speaking to a Ross, and it's not until it kind of comes out do you find that information. But on average, it's probably about 65% females that will access web chat, which is the complete opposite of what we see in face-to-face services. Normally we see, a 45-year-old white male will access our drugs and alcohol services. On web chat, it tends to be a slightly younger audience. It tends to be below 40. We don't get many people who are under 18 using web chat. And I think that is because they won't come onto a website to look for information or to look for advice. We're not in the right area for them. And that's something that I'm looking to explore later about how we better try out different places in which people can start conversations with us.
That's really interesting. Okay. Does anyone want to, I'm conscious there's a lot of us doing talking here, does anyone want to ask a direct question to Stephanie, so you can unmute and just jump in? It'd be useful if you show your hand and we can pick you and you can come on. Anyone want to ask a question? Say something to listen to me waffle on for the next 15 minutes. Okay.
If I might jump in with one, if that's all right, Ross.
Yeah, go for it.
I wonder what about, because obviously live chat can be a lot more immediate, and also you may be able to offer more meetings than you could do than if you're doing it face-to-face. I wonder how that works with people on their journey, because in a way previously if you had to kind of take a while to respond or schedule dates, it might have made it longer, but people might be experiencing it, they're getting through more stages more quickly, and whether that's beneficial or whether that has challenges as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think that instant gratification has never been an issue with people who access drugs and alcohol support, but that sort of immediate recovery worker in your pocket gives an excellent opportunity to, if you are feeling triggered or if you are feeling ready at that moment in time, then you can get instant support. And that immediate availability is something that has been really beneficial for people in terms of their journey, and also the fact that they don't have to make an appointment. They can just pop on and they can speak to somebody. One of the things that someone who'd accessed that they were really struggling with was once they finished work, they normally, obviously pre-COVID days, but once they finished work, they would go into a pub. And that would be their journey, that would be their constant, and they were really struggling to break that habit. And what they started to do was, once they finished work, they would go on to web chat, and we would talk to them as they got onto the bus. And that helped break a habit for them. And it enabled them to be able to access, someone to talk to, or someone to talk to that didn't know anything about them. So it really helped with that, individual, and being that kind of conduit to help people access the right support as well. Is that if someone who was coming on to us was another example is an individual who was in withdrawals was on to us, and we spoke to that person, and we got their details, and we phoned their GP, and we got the right service for that person. So web chat isn't the be all and end all for certain individuals, but we're able to help the person depending on what stage you were, or pull in the other resources. And being able to link that person in with a GP, get them an appointment that day, or have the GP phone them back, we can advocate and we can get the right help that they need because they're not really sure about it. That instant being available there can be challenging sometimes. If someone, just now when we're in the when we're in the middle of lockdown, if anyone else is in Glasgow, we're still in the middle of lockdown, but not being able to do the regular things that they were able to do, and web chat's there and they can speak to someone all the time, then that can be putting plans in place for that person so that they're not spending all day just talking to us, because as much support as we can be, it's not necessarily the right part of their journey just to be speaking to us all the time. So that instant availability can be challenging for some people to understand as well, about how they don't have to spend so much time with us, that they can use other resources as well.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that's really stood out for me with the approach that your organisation's taken, is that there's not a concern about here's how our organisational structures look and here's the way that you need to fit into it as a user. It's completely reversed that. I think if there's like one simple principle to take away, is just that notion of putting yourselves in your user's shoes, and the idea that to self-refer I have to download a Word document off your site and fill it out, and then I email it to an admin person, then a week later I get a response, and I have to go through that really formalised pathway. For some of the organisations in this room, particularly where someone's at a crisis point, the idea that they're going to do that is kind of bordering on ludicrous. And so for me, I think it's really just, again, that opportunity to go back to how is that user living their lives, and how do we provide an intervention in a way that's as simple as possible, that might lead on to that longer term, more intensive support, but they need that initial safe way of accessing it, and that's not going to come through a Word document. Maddie, any thoughts from you or questions?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions that have just come in there that are kind of around the same things. Starting with Emma down to Helen. So things around, the question is, what extra safeguarding measures do you have in place for participants and staff running sessions virtually? But that would be, my question would be, have you put any in? Because sometimes, face-to-face in the office and virtually, it's the same thing but different. So you would probably have safeguarding measures anyway that could probably just transfer, but that's part of that question. Then looking at how do you publicise them online, abandoned chats that perhaps where the person has had to leave abruptly, how does that finish? And then just that, as Ross kind of touched on there, things around what training did you access for staff to be able to do this? Was that necessary, or is it a case of a lot of people know how to use WhatsApp, it's very similar, there is no official training course, if you like? So kind of, sorry, in a nutshell, there you go, Stephen.
There's 74 questions, answer them all now.
Yes, that's my answer, yes. I think the safeguarding thing has always been a big part for us, and I think that safeguarding in general within the kind of social care field is massive. I think that there's two aspects to that. There's a safeguarding for the staff, and then there's a safeguarding for the individuals who access the service. And one of the first things that we done was try and think through what that process would be. If someone's sitting there right in front of you and they're not able to safeguard themselves, then you know what to do. But when someone accesses their web chat, the only bit of information that we have about them is their IP address. And that obviously caused an awful lot of fear organisationally about how we can help and how we can support and protect people. And as part of what I had done at the beginning was that we went and met with Police Scotland within their call handling base and started the conversation with them about, we have people who access our web chat service and we have this process in place. And our process is that we would phone either 999 or 101, depending on what the concerns were. And we would explain what our fears were, and then we would send them a transcript of the conversation that we had. And they would be able to work their very scary magic of locating where that person is and making sure that that person gets the right support at that time. They're able to pinpoint that person until to their house pretty much. And that actually was tested out in the very first year on Christmas Eve. In 2017 on Christmas Eve, I was having a conversation with someone who was from Nottingham who had said that they weren't able to keep themselves safe and then abruptly ended the chat. So I was on the phone to Nottingham Police Force, explained what my concerns were. I gave them the IP address. I gave them the transcripts of the conversation. And later on, it wasn't but a couple of minutes later, the person came back with and said, "Can you phone me?" and gave me their telephone number. So I had picked up the phone to them, and it hadn't been any longer than about 7 minutes since I phoned the police service. And while I was on the phone to them, the police arrived at their door. So they're able to very much track a person down where it is and where they're located. There's some aspects where we're not able to do that. You know, if a person's coming in through a protected network, if a person's coming in through a VPN, then we're not able to give the exact location of what that person was. But we would follow the same principle of making sure the staff were aware about a person that's coming in, maybe with some safeguarding concerns. And that can be anything from, you know, like a child protection issue where it's a mum that's coming on that's maybe, you know, talking about drinking a bottle of wine in the morning, through to people who are not able to safeguard themselves. So yeah, our whole sort of principle is about how we best serve the people that access the support, but using very much the model of what we would use in a face-to-face service. If someone had phoned up your service from a private number and were saying things that were alarming you or concerning you, we would follow the exact same principles of that, of, you know, try and make people aware, and if the person comes back or if the person calls back, to try and get more information so that we can, you know, we can support them in the right way. In terms of our staff, all the staff that access our system, we have got mandatory training that everybody has to go through, and some of that is just general training that if you were a recovery worker that you would be doing anyway, and then other training is about the nuances of text versus face-to-face, or, you know, verbalizing how you're talking and how it can be slightly different interpretations of what people say or what people type when they type. One of the things that is a big thing is how blunt and to the point people can be when they start the web chat. So a lot of the how's your week been chat gets completely cancelled out as part of this. And the staff are always, it's one of the probably the most governance part of the work that we do, because we have a transcript of every conversation that happens. People can't just delete the transcript, that has to come through me as the owner. So we can see how that chat's went, and we can have the conversations backwards and forwards with a person about, well, why did you handle it in that way through supervision? Is there any different way in which you could handle it? The software that we use as well allows you to supervise the conversations, and I'm very keen for all the staff to supervise each other's conversation. And what that means is that for any one person accessing the support, there's maybe, you know, one person that's on the team that knows more information about that. And they're able to, we call it a whisper, but it's, you know, you would send that person a message with information. So while someone's having a conversation with one of the members of staff, if they're looking for a physical location, another member of the team can be going to find where that physical location is, and that stops any kind of long pauses or breaks in the chat. That provides a much better experience for the people that are accessing it. So we can check on what's happening, they can be supervised during the conversation, and also that on-call manager is available at any time should there be any concerns as well. We took a real shift just organisationally when everybody went to working from home, and we created very specific training around about how to set yourself up in an office, or how to set yourself up in your house, to make sure that you were adhering to confidentiality, but in the same token being able to provide the right support for people as well. What other questions was there? I can't remember.
No, that's super useful, Stephanie. So I think one of the things you mentioned there that's really useful for everyone to remember is that you're experts in what you do already, and the digital isn't like this big scary run your service completely differently. It's an add-on to the expertise you already have, and the way you've trained your staff is exactly that, recognizing the expertise and just giving them the top-up training they need. One of the things you mentioned there was the transcripts that you have, and how much data and information you're keeping. So last question on web chat, and then we'll talk a bit more about the online sessions that you're running. So Richard, on that kind of very aspect, was asking, like, how do you record what's happened in the web chat? Do you have a case management system? And then how do you manage all that detail? Because you're not just signposting people to other services, you're having actual conversations with other services, making decisions together. So how do you manage that whole process?
Yeah, it's something that we've kind of batted backwards and forwards about, a case management system, whether or not it'd be useful or not for people, for us to contain information about them. Or we follow the ICO guidelines in terms of how they manage their chats. So they keep transcripts for 2 years. So we keep that transcript for 2 years. And the system that we use, you're able to see a record of other conversations that that person's had with you. So we have another add-on that allows you to add notes into the transcript of the conversation. And in the notes, they're called sticky notes. It just lets you break down what exactly is happening, and what you're doing next. So for people that are accessing that ongoing support, there's a record of the whole conversation, but also a wee brief summary so that the person doesn't have to rehash everything that they say again. And that idea about the amount of data that we've got, I think that is, the kind of transcripts. We are as clear as possible with our privacy statement about what we do with that information, and how long that we actually keep it for. And that's a big part of it for us, is just that people are aware about what we're doing with that information. I've always been quite interested to have some form of kind of analysis of the text within what people actually come backwards and forwards with, to get ideas of themes, because when you've got 34,000 conversations, it's quite hard to kind of pull out that information from it. But as it stands just now, like, all the conversations get deleted automatically. So for every conversation that was 2 years old yesterday will now be deleted right with our system. And that happens, the live chat system does that automatically. But the notes have been something that's really useful for if we have to have like a management plan with people who are accessing the service, then we're able to put that so that when an advisor gets that conversation, they're automatically able to act on it, or they're automatically able to read it. Okay,
thank you. Siobhan, did you say there was another group question that had come in?
Yeah, so I think it's maybe kind of a similar thing, making things really clear to people, but there's been a lot of questions around the safeguarding of the group. So Melanie was asking how secure Google Meets itself is, and they've been using Zoom and they're a bit worried about the security. So if you could talk about Google Meets itself. And then similarly, Emma's been then asking what safeguarding measures you've put in place to run the group sessions.
Sorry, my dog just wandered into the house.
That's all right.
In terms of like the actual Google Meets, it was one of the, when lockdown started, we were aware that there was some security issues with various different platforms. Within Google Meets, there wasn't our concerns weren't there about people being able to access. One of the things that we learned very quickly was that you never publish your meeting code on the internet in any way, shape or form. And that is why we have the route of entry into our groups as you have to contact us with with an email address, and then we'll send you the link to be able to do it. We did have people who had bombed some of the groups that happened. People want to make it as accessible as possible, so they don't want too many barriers to jump through, but they also want to prevent people who haven't got the best intentions of coming on. And we've kind of went backwards and forwards a lot with this, and I think it's something that's quite interesting, is that I don't think there's any one right answer to what's the best way to do it. Like, we've had people where they will publish the link code and then they'll just remove people if they're not in the right space, or if they're not in, if they're not there for the right intentions, and that prevents a barrier of people having to jump through another hoop to get into a group. With the national groups, we keep it very much in this journey just so that we can manage the numbers more than anything else. There might be a different sign-up route later on as we learn more to access the group, but this is what we're doing just now. In terms of the actual platform itself, our information governance had done an awful lot of work around about Google and how it's used to try and make sure that the platform, I think everybody, or some people, get slightly uneasy about Google and how much information they store about people, but certainly with the license that we have with them, we are the controllers of the data. So we make sure that we are the controllers of the data, so that we don't have any of the barriers or the sort of fears around what's happening with it.
Yeah, and it's worth saying, I guess, to people in the room as well, that if you claim your free Google G Suite for Charities license, then you'll be able to access exactly the same kind of terms and conditions as well, which was really useful. So that's different from just using the kind of free off-the-shelf Google Mail account. You've got to set this up. But if you go to Charity Digital, you can get more information on that. Or if you just Google for non-profits, you'll be able to get some more information. But it's a fairly easy sign-up process.
Yeah, and that's what we use organisationally. That's what we've done for our whole organisation, was sign up for that. Great.
Cool. Okay. Any final ones coming from people? I've got a couple of questions. They're purely selfish ones. I'm going slightly off tangent here.
Ross,
sorry,
there were a few that I highlighted a few minutes ago. There were kind of series of questions that were coming in around the chat, so kind of staff capacity, what the typical wait time is like. So I think people are just kind of interested in that question of, particularly because you flagged it, quick responses seem to be a very positive thing. How you manage that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of our wait time, I think the average wait time is 6 seconds if people have to enter a queue. And make sure that we have the staff capacity to be able to man the actual number of people that are coming in to access the chat. So during sort of lockdown, we noticed a dip in the people that were accessing every support organisationally. So face-to-face support, online support, there was a dip. And then in the middle of lockdown, there was a massive increase in people looking for online support. So we had to, throw additional staff onto the service to make sure that we could manage it. So just now, on average, conversations will probably take about 20 minutes. It depends on what the topic is. Drugs, people who are talking about drugs will take slightly less time, so between sort of 15 to 18 minutes on a conversation. People who are talking about alcohol will talk for a little bit longer. And that is... that to me is just interesting alone, to find out how long people talk for about specific things, and how old you are has an impact on that. But yeah, I think that the managing the capacity, Monday mornings are always really busy. We know that a Monday is the busiest time in our service, and that's with people looking for support with alcohol. We tend to find people looking for support with drugs will come on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and then you've got people who are worried about the weekend. We'll start, looking at kind of Thursday, Fridays, for people worried about what's going to come up next. So it lets you see a real sort of thought process with individuals accessing the support. We have availability at the weekend as well, so people can come online at the weekend and chat with us, and that helps not only people who've never accessed support, but organisationally, if we've got a service that's not opened on a Saturday, then people can come online and they can talk to us online, which gives them another access or another avenue for a different level of support as well.
Right. I was just going to quickly ask. It was slightly off tangent, but just be good to get some information on it about your use of Better Impact. And I don't know if it's something that you're involved in, Stephanie, but I know that We Are With You have been using it for volunteer recruitment. And it'd just be interesting, just 'cause it's a tool that I don't think is that commonly known in the third sector, and it's quite interesting. But just literally like a 1-minute overview would be useful for people in the room.
Yeah, so Better Impact is pretty much just a case management system for individuals, so that they're able to sign up online and be logged within our. We use it, as you said, Ross, we use it for volunteers, so people are able to access a sign-up process, and that will go directly to the service, and then the service can manage their volunteers from there, so they can say about when they're available to make sure that they've met the right needs to be able to volunteer, if they've got any disclosures or anything that needs done. So yeah, we were using it very much for our volunteers. We're starting to move away from Better Impact now and trying to integrate within our existing system that we use for HR. So we use iTrent as a system for HR, and we're looking to use that for volunteers so that we don't have too many different things on the go at any one time. And I think that that's something that I don't know if any other organisations experience this, but there can be lots of different systems, and that can be confusing for staff members about how what's the best thing to use for a different person. And if we're using one system for all the people in our organisation, then it shouldn't really matter if you're paid or not. Why would you have a different system for someone who was just a volunteer? So yeah, I think just now certainly we're talking about whether or not it would be better to use just the integrated system that we have at the minute. Okay. But the Better Impact lets you break things down, and it unfortunately doesn't do anything too unique to what the system that we pay for does.
Cool. Okay, thank you for that. I've taken a slight tangent, but I did want to kind of highlight that to you, because I thought it was just a nice, interesting tool that you guys are using. What I'd like to do, we're going to finish up soon because we're losing a lot of people for lunchtime. But it'd be good if you could give us 2 to 3 top tips. So if there's a charity in this room that's thinking about deploying online groups or running live chat, what are your 2 to 3 big tips for them with their next steps?
My biggest tip is don't be scared of risk. I think that getting some people in the room who have got understanding about what the potential risk could be, and talk through what you would do for risk. But you don't have to have all the answers to every question when you first start. I think that that's been one of the biggest learning curves for us, was that if you try and predict everything that's going to happen, you're not going to be able to. So one of the best things is think of overall risk and how you would manage that, and then see what happens and see what comes through. And you can learn from risk. You can learn from from experiences that have happened. And another thing is, what do you want to achieve from the online group, or what is a success measure for you between the online group and between for live chat as well? But our online group, our success measure just now is that people attend, but that might change as it evolves, as we start to get more people attending. But knowing exactly what you want to achieve out of it is something that is really key. For live chat or for our web chat service, we changed very quickly based on what we learned from it. We thought it was going to be transactional. We thought we were going to be looking to get people into face-to-face support, and then we realised that that wasn't actually what people were looking for. So being adaptable for what people are actually asking for online rather than prescriptive is something that I would say as well, is that if individuals are coming on to use your web chat service, trying to be as open as possible to meet their needs, and that helps kind of steer what it is and helps better inform you about what's lacking on your website. So I think that adaptability based on what comes through as well.
Yeah, that's a really good bit of advice actually, probably to finish on. Is I think personally a lot of live chat that's been deployed by charities has kind of lacked that kind of metric piece. It's just a thing where it's treated in the same way that a generic phone line is treated, and it's actually, there's not often a lot of thought as to what do we want to get out of this. And for some of them actually there can be a really frustrating user experience where someone comes on with a really difficult problem and they've taken that leap of doing it, and then they're told, yeah, we don't deal with that thing here, you need to pick up the phone, you need to do this, and then they're passed to someone else. And it's like, this isn't a kind of middle channel that then you push people off to somewhere else. That may be part of it, but that can't be the core reason you use this. If that's the core reason you want to deploy this, don't do it at all, would be my advice. John, do you want to kind of make any final points in terms of that?
Yeah, thanks. And I think that theme you've been highlighting, Stephanie, of like responsiveness is so important, because if you can adapt quickly, you can really keep up with people as they need different things. One quick thing we're highlighting is it's actually, we've done 34 DigiShifts over the summer, so a huge number of them. And we've been doing a bit of reflecting recently in SCVO, so we're going to change a little bit slightly. So it'll be coming up in October and November, there will be slightly fewer DigiShift calls. There'll be initially once a fortnight and then once a month, but we're also going to be looking at things like training and in-depth guides to help organizations, because we recognize that a lot of organizations now is a time where they've adopted something short term to get them going, and then are looking at building something longer term that they can use as a key service over the months ahead. So we're looking at finding ways to provide that support. So if you have a wee look in the chat window, you'll see a link to a blog there. It just gives a kind of update on our reflection on where we've been recently and where we're heading next. But as always, there's lots and lots of resources on the website. And Siobhan, I think, has already highlighted that this will be live as a recording in a wee while on our YouTube channel as well.
Superb, thank you, John. Yeah, just a reminder that, I mean, there's loads of interesting stuff actually going on from SCVO, not just the DigiShift events, but they've had amazing guest speakers like Jason Leach on recently. So do go and have a look at the SCVO events page. There's tons of good stuff in there. And then we're still running the Curve training. So we've got digital skills training. So we've got some service design sessions, and we've got another one on involving users coming up soon. So they're free, so you can get them on the Third Sector Lab website as well. Thank you so much for your time today, Stephanie. That was really useful. I'm just going to give another round of applause because it was so good.